This is a hot take from the Small Business Cybersecurity Guide.
Imagine walking into the office on Monday morning and discovering that nobody can log in. Finance can't reach the accounts. Operations can't reach the customer records. Every computer is locked. Every password appears useless. And somebody has already restarted their machine 4 times because apparently that remains Britain's first line of cyber defense. Then the printer starts. After years of refusing to print a 2-page PDF because it claims to be offline, out of paper, low on cyan, or emotionally unavailable, it suddenly works perfectly. It begins printing ransom notes. Your office printer has switched sides. It has joined organised crime. And naturally, that's the part everyone wants to talk about because it's strange, visual, and slightly funny. Hackers made the office printers print their ransom demands. That makes a cracking headline. It sounds like the ending of a cheap cyber thriller where every monitor displays a skull and somebody in a hoodie shouts that they're inside the mainframe. But the printer isn't the story. The printer is the attacker taking a bow. By the time paper starts sliding into the output tray, the actual failure has already happened. The attackers are inside. They've found the important systems. They've found the administrator accounts. They've worked out which controls are real, which controls only exist in audit reports, and which controls somebody disabled because an old application had a tantrum. The printer is just how they chose to tell you that your entire security operation has gone to shit. The incidents investigated by Kaspersky involved 2 organisations, and neither appears to have been brought down by some dazzling attack against a printer. The first organisation had remote desktop exposed to the internet, RDP. Again, for fuck's sake. We've spent years telling businesses not to expose remote desktop directly to the public internet. We've published guidance, we've deployed VPNs, we've introduced multi-factor authentication, we've built zero-trust products, we've drawn endless diagrams containing clouds, shields, and reassuring padlocks. Yet businesses still put RDP on the internet as though attackers might politely decide it looks private and move along. Behind that exposed service sat a machine connected to 8 terabytes of mission-critical financial data. 8 terabytes. That isn't an unfortunate technical detail, that's practically a treasure map. You couldn't make it more appealing to an attacker without naming the server Pleasey Rob Us and opening port 3389 with a handwritten invitation. The attackers got in, found the storage and used BitLocker to encrypt it. Yes, that BitLocker, the security feature built into Windows to protect your data if somebody steals the machine. The attackers didn't need to bring some extraordinary custom encryption platform. They used the victim's own security control. BitLocker did exactly what it was designed to do. It encrypted the data and denied access to anyone without the key. The only small problem was that the criminals controlled the key. That's the bit businesses still struggle to understand. Technology doesn't know who the good people are. It doesn't know that the managing director owns the company. It doesn't care that the IT provider has a logo containing a shield. It can't detect moral character from an administrator account. It follows instructions. Once an attacker controls the administration layer, your tools become their tools. Your encryption protects them. Your remote access serves them. Your management platform deploys their commands. Your backup console becomes another target. Security products don't save a badly controlled environment. They simply give whoever has control more powerful buttons to press. Then we reach the part where everyone in the post-incident meeting suddenly develops selective memory. Endpoint protection had been disabled on the affected system because of an application compatibility issue. Of course it had. There's always an application compatibility issue. Somewhere in the business sits a critical application that was probably written before broadband, supported by a vendor that answers the telephone twice a month, and held together by undocumented settings that nobody wants to touch. The application doesn't behave properly when modern security software watches it. So instead of fixing the problem, isolating the system, or forcing the vendor to provide an acceptable answer, somebody disables the protection temporarily. Everything catastrophic in IT starts temporarily. Temporary administrator access, temporary firewall rules, temporary exclusions, temporary shared passwords, temporary servers that remain in production until archaeologists express an interest. Nobody plans to leave the endpoint protection disabled. They simply get busy. The application starts working again. The complaint goes away, the ticket closes, everyone moves on. The exception remains. The attacker's notice. Attackers have an irritating habit of noticing the exact thing everyone else forgot. So now we've internet exposed remote desktop, critical financial data, and a system where endpoint protection was deliberately removed because security had become inconvenient. That isn't a sophisticated intrusion, that's a business arranging the furniture for its own fucking burglary. The second incident managed to raise the standard. The attackers came through a misconfigured Microsoft SQL server. The database service faced the internet. It could execute operating system commands. The credentials had been exposed in code published on GitHub. That isn't one mistake. That's a full sequence of decisions, each one looking at the previous decision and deciding it hadn't gone far enough. The database was reachable from the internet. The database could control the operating system. The credentials needed to access it were publicly available. At that point, calling the attackers sophisticated becomes almost insulting. We use that word far too often after breaches because sophisticated sounds comforting. It suggests the victim faced an elite and unstoppable opponent. It suggests the controls were excellent, the team performed brilliantly, and only a truly exceptional attacker could possibly have succeeded. The phrase exposed database with public credentials doesn't offer the same emotional support. It sounds like somebody failed to secure the server and nobody checked, which is rather closer to the truth. Sometimes the cyber incident report shouldn't say sophisticated threat actor. Sometimes it should say, we fucked up. The attackers entered and remained there for 3 months. 3 months isn't a quick intrusion. 3 months is residency. They had time to look around, test permissions, understand the estate, and find out how the organization worked. They learned which accounts mattered. They tried different methods. They weakened settings. They established persistence. They attempted to create web shells and installed legitimate remote management software. This wasn't a frantic smash and grab. They settled in. They were effectively shadowing the IT department. Frankly, after 3 months, they probably understood the network better than the people being paid to manage it. Some security controls detected parts of the activity. Alerts were generated. That should be the most uncomfortable sentence in the entire story. The security tools didn't completely fail. They saw something, they raised warnings, they did the expensive bit everyone had paid them to do. Then what? That's the question businesses rarely ask until after the printers start producing ransom notes. What actually happens when your security platform raises an alert? Not what the contract vaguely implies, not what the salesperson suggested, not what management assumed after seeing the words monitored and protected on a proposal. What really happens? Does somebody investigate the device? Does somebody establish whether the activity succeeded? Does somebody isolate the machine, collect evidence, revoke access, and confirm the attacker has gone? Or does the alert create a ticket that sits beside password resets, printer faults, and a request from accounts to install a toolbar? An alert isn't a response. Detection isn't containment. A red icon on a dashboard doesn't remove an attacker. Businesses have spent enormous amounts of money buying visibility while leaving responsibility deliberately vague. The software vendor generates the alert. The service provider monitors the platform. The internal team receives the email. The business owner assumes the words managed service means somebody is handling it. Everyone is adjacent to the problem. Nobody owns it. Then the attacker remains inside for 3 months, and the post-incident report solemnly concludes that lessons must be learned. Bollocks. The lesson was already in the alert queue. Nobody dealt with it. You don't get to call it an unforeseen cyber incident when your own tools warned you and everybody just carried on with their day. That isn't bad luck. That's negligence wearing a dashboard. The attackers installed legitimate remote management tools. That matters because people still imagine cyber attacks as a collection of obviously malicious files. They expect antivirus to find something called ransomware.exe, display a dramatic warning, and save the day. Real attackers often use the same tools as legitimate IT teams. Remote access, script execution, software deployment, scheduled tasks, group policy, PowerShell, and BitLocker. Why would an attacker build a noisy custom platform when trusted commercial software already provides remote control across the entire estate? Why fight the operating system when you can administer it? The attackers used tools that looked normal because the tools were. The behavior was malicious, but the software itself belonged in an IT department. This is usually described as living off the land, which sounds far too wholesome. It makes the attackers sound like they've moved to a small holding and started making chutney. What it actually means is that they use the victim's own systems to destroy the victim. BitLocker became the ransomware. Group policy became the delivery mechanism. Remote management became command and control. The printers became the extortion channel. The attackers didn't need to smuggle a weapon into the building. The business had already installed the fucking armory. That's why simply collecting more tools doesn't fix this problem. You need control over how those tools appear, who can deploy them, and what normal use looks like. A new remote management agent appearing across the estate should cause a reaction. A database service launching operating system commands should cause a reaction. BitLocker suddenly activating on a server should cause a reaction. Group policy changing across large numbers of machines should cause a reaction. An administrator account moving through the network outside normal working patterns should cause a reaction. Instead, in too many organizations, activity only becomes urgent when the physical printer begins explaining the breach to reception. In the first incident, the business rushed to restore the encrypted disk. You can understand why. The business was down, staff couldn't work, customers were waiting, money was being lost, management wanted action, not a thoughtful conversation about evidence preservation. So somebody restored the data. In doing so, they damaged or destroyed evidence that investigators needed. This is what happens when an organization writes its incident response plan during the incident. People start clicking. Somebody reboots the server. Somebody removes the suspicious account. Somebody changes every password without recording the order. Somebody wipes a machine because it looks infected. Somebody restores a backup over the top of the affected data. Everyone believes they're helping. By the time the forensic team arrives, the digital crime scene has been scrubbed, rearranged, and reopened for business. Then the organization asks for a definitive explanation of what happened. You can't demand certainty after destroying the evidence. You can't hose down the crime scene and then complain that forensics can't find the footprints. Restoring service matters, but restoring service isn't the same as removing the attacker. A server working again doesn't prove the environment is safe. It only proves the server is working again. The intruder may still have credentials. They may still have remote tools installed. They may still have persistence elsewhere. They may still have access to backups or cloud services. Turning the lights back on doesn't mean the burglar has left the building. It might simply mean you've made it easier for them to see what else they can steal. In the first case, the reported demand was around $3,000. That sounds surprisingly small because we've become used to ransomware stories involving millions. But $3,000 may have been the point. It's high enough to make the attack worthwhile and low enough to tempt a small business into paying quickly. It avoids a prolonged board discussion. It may cost less than a forensic investigation. It may feel cheaper than several days of downtime. The attacker isn't looking for a cinematic payday. They're running a business model. Find exposed services. Gain control. Encrypt something important. Ask for an amount the victim might authorize before bringing in insurers, lawyers, and incident responders. Then repeat. You don't need to compromise a multinational when thousands of smaller organizations continue exposing remote access, publishing credentials, ignoring alerts, and disabling controls whenever software becomes difficult. The attacker doesn't need to be brilliant. They need the victim to be consistently careless. That's the depressing economics of this. The criminal doesn't need to crack every business. They only need to find the ones still running on hope, exceptions, and some poor bastard's memory. None of this means printers are harmless. They're networked computers disguised as office furniture. They run operating systems. They store documents. They hold address books. They expose services. They often run old firmware and use credentials that were set when the device came out of the box. Businesses patch laptops every month while completely ignoring the machine that handles payroll, legal documents, contracts, medical records, and every confidential form anyone prints. Printers are often badly managed because people don't think of them as computers. They think of them as equipment. Then one day the equipment begins issuing instructions on behalf of criminals. In this case, the printer wasn't necessarily the route into the network. It was the attacker's loudspeaker that made the compromise physical. The breach stopped being an alert in a portal. It stopped being an unusual login buried in a log file. It stopped being something management could postpone until the next meeting. It arrived on paper. That's why this story works so well. People can ignore an email alert. They can ignore a red dashboard. They can ignore warnings from the IT team for months. It's much harder to ignore a ransom demand sitting in the printer tray. Apparently, the best way to get management to read a security alert is to print the bastard. So no, the real story isn't that hackers made printers produce ransom notes. That's the flourish. The real story is that one organization exposed remote desktop beside critical financial data and disabled endpoint protection because security interfered with an application. Another exposed a powerful database service, leaked credentials through public code, generated security alerts, and still allowed attackers to remain inside for 3 months. The criminals then used legitimate administration tools, built-in Windows features, and the victim's own infrastructure to complete the attack. They didn't bring some unstoppable weapon. The victims supplied almost everything. They supplied the access, the credentials, the remote management, the encryption, and the domain controls. They even supplied the paper. The attackers simply arranged the components in the correct order. That's what should worry you. Your organization probably owns more security technology than it did 5 years ago. It probably has more alerts, more dashboards, and more monthly reports. But is it actually better controlled? Does anyone notice when a new administration tool appears? Does anyone challenge an exposed service? Does anyone review public code for secrets? Does anyone approve security exclusions and then make sure they're removed? Does anyone investigate an alert until they can prove the attacker has gone? Or has everyone agreed to pretend that buying the product was the same as solving the problem? Because it fucking isn't. A security product isn't an operating model. A dashboard isn't accountability. Monitoring isn't response. And a contract containing the word managed doesn't mean somebody is managing anything useful. If the honest answer is unclear, then the printer isn't your main problem. It's simply the device most likely to explain the problem in language management finally understands. The most irritating detail in this entire story isn't that the printers were compromised. It's that after years of paper jams, driver failures, spooler crashes, and messages claiming the tray is empty, when everyone can clearly see the paper, the printer chose the ransomware incident to become dependable. No hesitation, no warning light, no mysterious offline status. Just page after page of perfectly printed extortion. At last, the office printer worked exactly as instructed. It was simply taking instructions from the wrong fucking IT department. This has been a hot take from this small business cybersecurity guy, written and presented by Noel Bradford for SBCSG Productions, copyright 2026, all rights reserved.
This is a hot take from the small business cybersecurity guy.